Welcome to all who are attending the SLLS 131 meeting on Zoom. Today's speaker, as you know, is Professor Shihan Silva Jayasuriya, very eminent researcher and well-known in research circles on Afro-Asian affairs. She has affiliations with the two major universities in England, Cambridge and Oxford, also with many academic institutions in Sri Lanka and in many other countries. It's a great pleasure to have Shihan, and I thank her again for agreeing to speak to us on this topic. Shihan is not new to us. In fact, she appeared on the 17th of March in person at a meeting held in Ruan's house called Kafrinya Baila Manha, the African Influence on Asian Music. Number 37, 27 of June 2020, Portuguese Burgers, Language, Music and Dance. And number 92, 10th April 2022, Wally Bastions and Chorus Baila, Poetry, Music and Song performed by past and present artists. Shihan's presentation will be followed by a Q&A. Please wait for the Q&A time to post questions, but you can always use the chat window to type your questions if you have any. Okay, before I ask Shihan a few questions and invite her to do her presentation, I would like to share a few things about Shihan. These are in slide form. She's an elected fellow of the National Academy of Sciences of Sri Lanka and the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland. She's working as a senior research fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, University of London. She's a senior associate, Lucy Cavendish College, University of Cambridge, research associate, also at Cambridge. Then there's an interesting title, discretionary associate in Oxford, research associate also in Oxford. And coming to Sri Lanka, the blue one, she's the first Professor Sarat Amanugama visiting professor, University of Visual and Performing Arts, Colombo. She's a visiting research fellow, the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences. And she's a collaborative researcher, Department of Sociology, University of Colombo, and she's chair, National Scientific Committee. She's an esteemed scholar, writer, editor, musician, filmmaker, focusing on migration, commerce, and cultural exchange in the Indian Ocean, specializing in linguistics, music, and history. Her expertise spans academia and advocacy in higher education sectors and international NGOs. She's a winner of the Distinguished Rama Watomul Collaborative Lecture Series Award. She is recognized as a UN expert on Afro descendants in Asia and has contributed significantly to the UNESCO Slave Route Project. She has many books, and there's one called People of African Descent in Asia, which is she's very, very relevant to her expertise. Her research encompasses Sri Lanka, Malay, and Portuguese Burgher peoples, language and culture, and Sri Lanka society at large. Some people don't know this, but she is an accomplished pianist with a diploma in piano performance. She performs and researches African-influenced Sri Lankan music genres such as Baila and Kafrinya. Her interdisciplinary work bridges history, linguistics, music, and cultural studies, offering profound insights into the interconnected of global culture. Now, this is one of the books she has contributed to, and is very relevant to today's presentation, and she has written a chapter in that. And now I shall stop sharing, and I will ask Shihan, if she doesn't mind, a few questions about herself so that we got to know her. I have given a bit of background, but Shihan, you saw what I just presented now, but is there anything particular which gives you the most satisfaction in your academic background? You had so many things. Is there one or two or whatever which gives you the most satisfaction?
What gives me the most satisfaction? But you also want to know my academic background, or what gives me the
Oh,
most?
I have given your background, but what I want to know is after all your work, you work in Cambridge, Oxford, Sri Lanka, Japan. What are the things that give you the most satisfaction?
Well, I suppose what drives me is trying to find solutions to the research questions.
Oh,
And most of my research problems are in very marginal areas or areas that haven't been touched before, like the African diaspora in the Indian Ocean. So until, say, 2003, the book African Diaspora in the Indian Ocean, which I co-edited with Richard Pankhurst, the Ethiopianist,
yeah,
uh, the African presence and the scattered African people over the centuries weren't recognized, partly because they were assimilated, partly because they were in the villages or the forest. Yeah, so I mean, finding the solutions to these problems, however unimportant they may seem at the time
mhm,
to researchers at large, which is why they haven't looked at them, they
yeah,
have become important, like Creole languages, for example, when my PhD was on the Indo-Portuguese of Ceylon.
yeah,
So, yeah, when people are, conscious of the status of standard languages versus Creole languages,
yeah,
but now Creole languages have become important. So, I don't do them for the sake of academic importance, but for the sake of
yeah.
the excitement doing the research. But it's
Okay, so you are really interested in the flow of culture, if you like, from Africa to various parts of the world, include especially Asia,
yeah.
not inclusive Asia, not exclusively. All right, then, Shihan, I know that obviously you're born and bred in Sri Lanka, but are you resident in UK or in?
Yes, at the moment I'm in the UK, but in between these three universities, as you pointed out.
Yeah,
So yes, I have a research project in Cambridge, and I'm also in the African Center in Oxford. I've just become associated, and also in the Faculty of History.
yeah,
And the Commonwealth Studies has been my home for about almost 20 years now. So in between those three places, but when I go to Sri Lanka, I spend a few months there lecturing, teaching. All that is, of course, voluntary work
yeah.
that we
I
do.
know that's one of the things I was going to ask you because in spite of doing such a lot of work in Oxford, Cambridge, etc., you still do a lot of work in Sri Lanka. What is the driving force in doing that, you know?
Yes, I think for people like medical people, I know from my school people, medical people, when they go back, they can contribute in very obvious, direct ways. But I think others can contribute. Like myself, I see it as a way of throwing back. So these voluntary lectures that I give for no payment, for which are open to the public as well, supervising masters, PhD students, and also sitting on various bodies, advisory bodies. It's just a way of giving something back to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so that's the impression I got that a lot of us who are in other countries have this feeling of wanting to give back to a country which gave us so much. So we have to give back something too. And
Yes,
you can still do it although you are resident abroad. So you are a good example of what you are doing as. Now, I know I mentioned in the introduction that you're very shy about it, but I know you are a good musician. How come you got into music in such a serious way, enough to get a diploma in piano playing and all that?
yes, because I mean, I did my grade 8 when I was 14
Yeah,
in Sri Lanka in classical Western music.
yeah,
And then I had to stop because I was traveling from Panadura to Colombo to Devi Balika for my O levels and A levels. And then to accompany my son as a violinist, I took back to reading music. I had almost forgotten to read music. And then when I started talking about Baila and Catherine, I found that I couldn't get Sri Lankan pianists to accompany, to demonstrate, to play bailas.
uh-huh.
So I, who had never played music by ear, realized that I did have an ear, that I could not only read music.
2 years, 2 years.
Yes, yes. So then only slowly I started playing, and the way I play baila is totally different to the way I play classical music.
Yeah.
The pianists have commented with reading music, I'm more automated, whereas Baila I play with more emotion because I've heard it, it's imbibed, it's in me.
Good,
So
good.
that is why, which led me to understand what Catherine is, to dissociate it from chorus baila. And then I had to understand Vada baila, which is another genre which was brought, up to independence and beyond, which is giving way to the more popular form that Wally Bastian is known for, chorus baila. And I think one of the talks that you invited me, I spoke about it.
Yeah,
Since then, I've written a paper which it's on the internet.
yeah,
It's called Theorizing on the Genesis of Chorus Baila,
right.
because we can't hold what the Portuguese left in 1658. It's not tangible product. We don't have any scores, nothing left.
Yeah,
So I can only, by a process of elimination, say these are the forms that were left, and this is what influenced the composer, Wally Bastian,
yeah.
to come up with this new form of urban music.
Very good. Wonderful. It's a nice way how a hiatus led to you actually filling it yourself by doing the piano yourself. That's wonderful. What's your latest project? What you're working at the moment?
Yeah, that's quite different to my previous work, but in a sense, because I'm the National Scientific Committee chair of the ICAMOS, Intangible Cultural Heritage in
Yeah,
Sri Lanka, it took me to look at the lace, a handicraft of the southern province, something that my great aunts used to do. And I myself did some crocheting and knitting. So uh, I'm very interested in helping these people, which I'll talk about a bit later, because after the tsunami, the Biralu lace makers lost their houses, including the Biralu cottes, the pillows.
yeah,
So their lives had to be rebuilt,
right.
and there was outside help, and it's a very emotional thing you'll find on the internet. People from England went and helped them from the lace makers guild, and actually Sri Lankan lace is worn by Jane Eyre in the film.
Ah,
So
really?
two films in England have Sri Lankan lace.
Ah,
I'm also looking at not only safeguarding it, because people I interviewed for this project in January were telling me that the craft won't last more than 10 years because the people are very old now who are doing the lace. And once they die, the other people are switching over to substituting away to machine, just hemming and machining and getting better salaries, basically. So I'm looking at marketing, and that's another interesting angle. I'm talking to people who've taken lace to Sri Lankan lace to New York, even,
yeah.
you know.
Okay.
So it is beyond my intangible cultural heritage.
Well, it sounds an extremely challenging project, and if among the audience there are various expertise, if any one of us can help you, please send me an email and I will forward it to the people. And this leads me on to a similar thing, which is what is your latest book? You have done so many books. I'm going to show that later on. At least 8 or 10, at least you contributed or you have written or whatever it is. A lot of books. But what is your latest book?
Yes, the latest book, which has just come out, is called Global Portuguese.
Uh-huh.
And that's about 3 years of symposia, selection of paper presentations which were developed. And there are 14 chapters with an introduction and an epilogue. And it's 394 pages long and published by Leiden, in Leiden by Brill publisher. So that's just on the market, yes, now as a hardback copy.
I got a picture of that which I'll show later. And finally, what made you choose the topic for today about Leonard Woolf? Is there a story behind it or
Well, I will talk about it through in my presentation. I studied the translation of Village in the Jungle
yeah,
for my O level in Sinhala language, but of course, no emotions with that. But then later on, my husband Hemal, who studied the original version in Royal College for English literature, together with his classmate, Dr. Suren Paul, and together with Mr. Nathan Sivasambu, a philosopher from the University of Colombo, we all formed a society called the Leonard Woolf Society because we felt that Leonard Woolf wasn't recognized in England. So we got their relatives involved. And then I organized a conference on Leonard Woolf's work in Senate House in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. And we invited the Sri Lankan High Commissioner, the Mayor of Camden. We made a big noise about it, trying to give it big publicity. So at that stage, now that was the first time that I read the English novels. This was about 10 years ago. That when I read it in English, as an adult, and outside Sri Lanka, there's a totally new angle that I saw to the book. For one thing, I'm from the southern province, so I identified with it. Another thing, as I go along, I'll explain. It brought back memories of my childhood. And Leonard Woolf, as a person, is an amazing person. Outside being a polymath, he's a most a sensitive person who could empathize with the people whom he colonized. And remember, he was just a young man. He was just 24 years when he went to Sri Lanka, and he only spent 7 years. So he's 24 to 31, a young man of that age.
Okay, and then you and I, we discussed this together. Ruan also was involved, and we thought, hey, this is a good topic for the SLLS, which you're familiar with. And so it transpired that we decided to present it, and we had a lot of discussion, and we finally came to it. Okay, Shihan, thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind now sharing screen yourself and starting a presentation, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mahendra. Yes, so thank you for inviting me to give this talk, and I had to be thankful to Dr. Ruwan Soisa and to Dr. Mahendra Korala. And thanks everybody for giving up your time to come and listen to this talk. So as Mahendra explained, my chapter on Leonard Woolf is in this book, which follows a conference that I convened at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. It's called Legacies of Trade and Empire, Breaking Silences. And I think I should explain the words in the choice of words in the title. Legacies are the long-lasting impact of events or actions that occurred in the past. So colonialism, slavery, indenture are some examples. And what is trade? Trade involves exchanging goods and services involving money or other goods. And what's an empire is a difficult one to define. And in its simplest form, an empire can be thought of as a group of geographical entities ruled by a single monarch, a single government, or a single country. Diversity is a feature of empire and inevitably introduces asymmetric power relations, which is ingrained in its legacies. And power relations are something that are also part of Leonard Woolf's Village in the Jungle. And covers for books are very difficult. You have copyright problems. So I found a picture that I took of Trincomalee Fort, which some people think is quite enigmatic. And I find that it's like the hardness of the fort walls, the rock, and then at the end of the tunnel you see some light. So breaking the silence, breaking the silence of empire, and the legacies that it has left. That is a cliche that I was influenced by and inspired by my work with UNESCO, who broke the silence on enslavement. And because I was its rapporteur for a few years, and I was on the scientific committee, on the International Scientific Committee, and I was representing Asia. So that work led me to work with the UN now, which I'm working with the UN Office of the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. And we are working on a declaration, a UN declaration on the promotion, protection, and full respect of the human rights of people of African descent in Asia. So it's quite a big long haul since the Durban conference of the early 21st century, where slavery was declared a crime against humanity. So this is my home for 20 years almost, a building that Adolf Hitler wanted to bomb. But then he thought he could use it as the Nazi headquarters. So Senate House was saved. From that building, I organized a conference inviting international colleagues. I made sure that the speakers were balanced gender-wise, and also I wanted to make sure that they were from the countries that colonized people and also people who were colonized. So Frederick Noronha is from Goa, and his chapter, he contributed a paper on printing press in Goa, the Gutenberg type printing press that was established in 1556. And he himself is a publisher whose printing press is called 1556. And my colleague and co-editor Behrouz Shroff from California, University of California in Irvine, writes about the people of African descent in India, in the South Indian state of Karnataka, who are called Siddhis. That's their ethnic name. And then, of course, myself from Sri Lanka, writing about village in the jungle and looking at it as a code for decolonization, which will be the main part of the talk today. But also contributors are Ute Fendler, who wrote about the concept of creolization and choral identity, an interesting identity with power relations, because she looks as a choral, as a symbiotic relationship between a plant and an animal where nobody dominates and both are needed for each other's survival. And following that is Marie-Christine Parent from Canada, who wrote about the seashells, form of music called Sega Mutia, a creolized form of music. And then Tom Hooge first writes about food practices that the Dutch have taken from Indonesia to Suriname, South Africa, and Sri Lanka. So that is food is an understudied area in the diasporas, but people say that it's the last thing that migrants want to lose. Even if they lose their language, their religion, their music, their clothing, what they hold on to is food, and it has not been given much attention. And then Xin Li, a Chinese from the German University in Bayreuth, wrote on looking for Livingston, David Livingston, about the African Canadian writer Marlene Nubis Phillips' book, her writings about how she turns the power relations, and she dominates Livingston. So coming to Leonard Woolf, I think I've already explained. I will explain that and my title was Reflections on Ceylon, how he reflects, because he wrote the book after coming to England in 1911. The book was then published in 1913. Colonization, I think, needs explanation because it is people of one civilization and a mode of life trying to impose its rule upon a people of an entirely different civilization and mode of life. And that is a definition by Judith Scherer Hertz. So decolonization is giving people agency in their own affairs and self-government and self-rule. And this is something that Leonard Woolf writes about in his autobiography. When he was in the southern province, walking over those dried up paddy fields, he would write, those were the days of the Sinhalese kings. Here was a great civilization. He realized that the British need not be governing these people. So the absurdity of colonization sort of brought home to him in the southern province. My argument is that Village in the Jungle goes beyond the literary. I think most of you know the literary works. Perhaps well known is the late Yasmin Gunaratne's book itself, published by Edwin Mellon Press, called The Village in the Jungle. And there have been many scholars, some in Australia, many in Sri Lanka, and some even in England, who researched The Village in the Jungle from the literary point of view. But my PhD was on the Indo-Portuguese of Ceylon. As a linguist, I looked at the linguistics. And when I read The Village in the Jungle as an adult, the English version, what brought home to me was the linguistic value of the book. And also, as someone from the southern province, the ethnographic value of the book, the customs, the culture, all that Leonard Woolf had captured and writes in this so-called fictitious novel. So Leonard Woolf, who was he? So he was a writer, a publisher, a political theorist, and a British civil servant. He was a key member of the Bloomsbury Group. And in terms of his literary contributions, there are two novels he's left us, short stories. And of course, he was the founder of the Hogarth Press. As a political theorist, he contributed to the Fabian Society, Labour Party, League of Nations, and the United Nations. And his works on international governments and African economy are authoritative works. As a civil servant, he went out as a cadet and served in Jaffna and Kandy, and as the assistant government agent in Hambantota. So he worked in 3 provinces, moving from north to south. So as a novelist, his second novel is called The Vice Virgins, and the short stories, and these are the short stories that he's left: Stories of the East, A Tale Told by Midnight, Pearls and Swine, and The Two Brahmins. And his autobiographies are interesting because he divides his life into phases. So he begins from 1880, when he was born, and up to 1904. And that's when he went to Sri Lanka. So 1904 to 1911, Ceylon's autobiography part comes in Growing. And the next volume is 1911, when he comes back to England. 1911 to 1918, Beginning Again. Then 1919 to 1939 is Downhill All the Way. And the last part of his life, 1939 to 1969, is Journey, Not the Arrival Matters. Apart from those, he's left us letters, his diaries, and his academic works, which I've already mentioned: Empire and Commerce in Africa, a study in economic imperialism and civilization. So when I try to introduce Leonard Woolf, either they don't know him, or they have to be told that he's Virginia Woolf's husband, or they think this is 3 different people, because there are many angles to his work. So first of all, Leonard Woolf, as the political theorist. Do you want to read this? So he contributed to the Fabian reports on prevention of wars. And you can, I got a cough, so I think you can, Mahendra, can you read that part? Oh, is he there, Mahendra?
Yeah. Yes, and then on international government in 1916, there are 2 reports prepared for the Fabian Society again. League of Nations 1920, intergovernmental organized, established after World War I to promote international cooperation and prevent wars. So this really directly led to the League of Nations. International Government, book with an introduction by Bernard Shaw. United Nations 1945, intergovernmental organization with aims to maintain international peace and security. He was secretary of the Labour Party Advisory Committee 1919 to 1945, and literary editor of political journals, The Nation, The New Statements, The Political Quarterly. So Shihan, from what I gather from this is that he's very much a left-leaning person who's a humanist.
Yes, thank you, Mahendra. So as a publisher, he established with his wife, Virginia Woolf, the Hogarth Press, and their first publication, where Leonard Woolf wrote Three Jews and Virginia wrote The Mark on the Wall. So this Village in the Jungle is categorized with other novels that some of you must have read. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness is the only novel that's older than Leonard Woolf's, which was published in 1899. The other 2 works, Burmese Days in 1934 by George Orwell, and The Passage to India was published later, 1924. So coming to the beginning of Leonard Woolf's days in Trinity College, Cambridge, as an undergraduate, where he read classics. This is a photograph that I took of my husband, Hemal, who was a postgraduate there doing his PhD in biophysics. And it is also the college that his colleague from Royal, Dr. Suren Paul, was also a medical undergraduate in the same college. That is where they reinforced their friendship, so to say. So I thought that was a nice photograph, which I put in my chapter, published. This map shows where Leonard Woolf worked, and the years that he worked I put on the side. So he actually spent some time in Colombo as soon as he went, before he went to Jaffna, and then he moved southwards. So it's really in Hambantota that I think Leonard Woolf found himself in the loneliness, that he was. Because for 30 miles, there was no Englishman. He was all alone. This picture, I was lucky. The librarian of King's College, Cambridge, showed it to me when I was a visiting fellow in Cambridge. And the initials JMK stands for John Maynard Keynes. So Keynes took this photograph of Leonard and Virginia, which is quite an unofficial, informal photograph. So Leonard didn't like being an imperialist, and in his biography, he writes with the growing part, the one that's entitled Growing, I did not want to be a successful imperialist, to become a colonial secretary or governor. His Excellency Sir Leonard Woolf, KCMG, unquote. And now I'm coming to the volume, the Sinhala version, the A.P. Gunaratna translation, 1947. You'll recognize Malini Fonseca and Gamini Fonseca on the cover of the book. That is from when Lester James Pearis made the film. And this is an extract from a French teledrama of 1961, when the film was shown in the Cannes Film Festival. And a ethnomusicologist, a French ethnomusicologist, sent it to me. And I will just read the gist of what the French is saying. It's saying that it's comparing it to Partha Panchali, Satyajit Ray's, and it's saying that never before had the French public been able to see something like this, and that they shouldn't miss seeing this film. So the main characters of the film, of the book, Silindu and his twin daughters, Punchimanike and Hinihami, and the setting is a village called Bedagama, fictitious village, and the background is the power structures, the colonial administration and the harshness of the jungle, and the challenges that the villagers face, the poverty, the disease. It also brings out their superstition, the belief in karma, the unsympathetic colonial system, and the jungle itself, the dangers of the jungle. So now I'm going to ask my husband Hemal to read the poem that he composed. He wrote 5 poems for this chapter. They're all in my book published, but he's going to read you the chapter.
The poem I composed, one of the poems, is called Jungle Presses In. Baddegama and Woolf's jungle are intertwined. The two press in, an inseparable pair, a binary star, forever in a tight embrace. A snake and mongoose dance, gauging each other with suspicious eyes, looking for an opening. An undefined fear lurks, riding on air, blowing through its humming and twinkling interior. A tortured self, gnarled, twisted by drought, yet standing its ground, playing host to jackals, elephants, wild pigs, peacocks, and leopards, amongst many, many others. Silindu, a pressured man, battles inside the black box, striving to make ends meet in a dual existence of hunting and crop cultivation in his hena. There is no escaping his bounded world of trees and the perpetual twilight of their shade, where tired and flustered souls may rest, discarding restless entropy, directing ceaselessly the arrow of time, stirring the guts of the jungle and agitated minds. At nightfall, when the sun has sunk below the horizon in the Indian Ocean, there is some respite from the stifling heat. A sea breeze from the west, laden with moisture, gushes in from Hambantota beneath the moonlight dome to sprinkle drops of soothing rain amongst the starlight arrowing in through the canopy, mingling with the flickering green fluorescent lights of the fireflies.
Thank you, Hema. That is lovely, lovely poem.
So coming back now to the linguistic part, I, as a linguist, you know that when people who are bilingual speak, and they borrow words from the other language and use it in their own. So Leonard Woolf had borrowed words that were typical, like exclamations. Like in his book, he used words like ayo, ane, and also swear words like, balla, maybe chi chi, like parea, like vesimau, bad words that we use. And so these are just a few examples. There are many more examples in the chapter, which I don't want to go into detail now. But phrases like Nanchuhami, Umbe kata miris wage sarai, which are almost not possible to translate. And that's how the English version is Nanchuhami, your tongue is still as sharp as chilies. I'm not sure what still, how the word still crept in there. But sometimes, you can't translate one language to another anyway. But I thought the word tikakpisu was the most interesting word, which no foreigner, his Leonard Woolf's English friends, wouldn't be able to understand, which Sri Lankans only know what it means. Because it doesn't mean someone is pathologically, clinically mad, but he's, slightly off the rails. So, and this becomes quite a useful strategy in the end when Silindu is charged as a hunter, because he didn't know quite what he was doing. So, yes, so Mahendra, would you mind reading this part? Yeah.
The indictment for the murder was read, and the witnesses for the prosecution then gave their evidence. They were cross-examined by Silindu's advocate, only with a view to showing that it had been well known in the village that Silindu was mad. They admitted that he had always been tikakpisu.
Thank you. And then I found Leonard Woolf's ideas, his understanding of cause and effect, and sin, rebirth, and karma, for example, were quite amazing. And so to give you an example of cause and effect, maybe Mahendra again, could you read this slide, cause and effect example?
This is another thing which I do not understand. To the madman, Pissu, this seems foolish to kill a man because he has killed. If it is a sin, will he not be punished in the next birth?
Thank you. And then the idea of sin, again, Mahendra, I think.
It is a sin to kill. Even the louse in the hair must not be cracked between the nails. The other things I do not understand. I have no daughter and no wife and no heart. It is better to be without. They stand in one's way on the path. And to starve? What need to starve? My son, in every village is a handful of rice for the wanderer. As for the hanging, that is very foolish. The judge must be a foolish man, but I do not think it will hurt you. Remember, it is not for the killing of the two men, but for the previous birth. Then there comes hell. You must have killed many deer and pig. This is the old man who is speaking to Sirindu. And
Thank
Sindhu says, yes, yes, I am a hunter. But what of that, father? What of that? Each is a sin, for I told you, didn't I, that the Lord Buddha said, it is a sin to kill. My son, you are a hunter. You know the jungle. Surely you have seen the evil there and the pain, always desire and killing. No peace or rest there either for the deer or the pig or the little grey mongoose. They have sinned and are far from nirvana and happiness. And like the she-devil, they sin again only to bring more evil on themselves by their blindness. What happiness is there in it, my son? The deer and the pig, they too are upon the path. It was greater sin to kill them than the other two. For those two, you say, were bringing evil upon you. But what did the deer and the pig do to you? Hey, hunter, tell me that. When you're talking about killing the other two, he meant the two people that Sindhu actually killed. Okay.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so when I went to Hambantota, I tried to take a photograph of the residency, and the gate was locked. So I took this photograph, just peering on, tiptoeing. That's all you can see, the Dutch colonial style bungalow where Leonard Woolf worked after dinner as well. He was just a workaholic. And the picture that you see behind me is one of the views, from Hambantota, from that house that you get the water and the trees. So the Puravidya department tour has done some good work here, and I will read the third paragraph. Hambantota උපදිසා ප්‍රතිවරයා ලෙස ක්‍රිස්තු වර්ෂ 1908 සිට 1911 දක්වා සේවය කළ ලෙනාඩ් වුල්ෆ් නම් බ්‍රිතාන්‍ය ජාතික නිලධාරයා විසින් එම ස්ථානය සම්බන්ධ සිය දිනපොතේ විස්තර අඩංගු කර ඇත. සිය නිල නිවසට අනුයුක්තව සිටි සේවකයන් පිළිබඳවත් අශ්වගාල සහ එහි අසුන් හා අශ්ව රථ සම්බන්ධවත් ස්ථාලයේ සේවය කළ සේවකයා පිළිබඳත් සඳහන් කිරීම ඔහුගේ වාර්තා අතර වේ. So it's quite clearly identified and documented properly. This actually is from Leonard Woolf's autobiography, the Hambantota district, and it has three areas. Magampattu, East Kiruapattu is the other one, and Magampattu was the area, Leonard Woolf's favorite area. But East Kiruapattu has a personal connection to me because my grandfather was a Mudlier there in 1918, after Leonard Woolf, of course. And then he moved on to Matara, Vellabadapattu, as Gate Mudlier. He got a promotion. And what was interesting is I discovered through the internet that the University of Illinois had the Ceylon Banking Commission Memorandum in 1934, where my grandfather had proposed development for the southern province. And these are some of the ideas that I thought were interesting that he put forward. He proposed cotton and paddy cultivation to development, spinning and weaving mills, enhancing employment opportunities for women in particular, and the importance of introducing well-trained teachers to the district, and to developing banks for villagers where credit facilities by hypothecation of crop provision of agricultural implementations. And not sure all of you know what hypothecation means, but I had to look up the dictionary what it meant. So fertilizer also for increasing profitability of coconut plantations and developing other food products using coconut. So influence from my childhood days, going around with my grandfather, I had seen the poverty of the villagers and their struggles. So that is kind of governed my latest project on lace making. And this is a poster when I gave my presentation to the National Center for Advanced Study on Humanities and Social Sciences and it was for the panel to the council, where all the deans of all the universities, arts faculties, social sciences and humanities were present, either through Zoom or in person, and it was in the UGC building in Ward Place. So it was quite a high-powered audience, and I had good feedback on my preliminary work, and they really appreciated my work, so which was very encouraging for me. I knew I was on the right tracks. So this is a bungalow within an estate in Tangol, my great-grandparents' house called Peace Haven, which is now, this was a 49-acre coconut plantation, which is taken over by Anantara Hotel. But this is where we spent our family holidays. And this looks like a Dutch-style bungalow. Perhaps an architect, Nilan Kure, has told me that this add-on area, which is where my mother, father, and my siblings used to sleep. These are large bedrooms. There are only 4 bedrooms. And he says that this looks like a British add-on in terms of architecture. But the amazing thing is that in the night you could hear the hummane, the boreholes, and not to mention all the fantastic things that go in a place like this, the Kajupuhulam, all the palamada that you can, you see in the middle of the coconut. And of course, it's lucky because there's a lagoon, a marshy area, and where the turtles come and lay their eggs. So this sort of clicked with me when I read The Village in the Jungle, and I empathized with his loneliness, and the natural beauty and his observations and his sensitivity, not just for the people, but also for nature. So here you see Leonard Woolf working away as a workaholic. And there are several editions of the Leonard in the Woolf's Village in the Jungle. So I worked on the Eland edition, but the original was published in 1913. And of course, I argue that he was anti-colonial. His involvement with the left-leaning Labour Party supports that view. And he was not just sympathetic to the people he administered, he empathized with them. And I think he was able to do that by mastering the language, not just Sinhala, spoken Sinhala, but the jungle village idiom, which A.P. Gunaratna has done a brilliant translation of. And Leonard Woolf, actually got into the minds of the people through the language, by understanding the language. He was able to leave his Englishness and go to the other side. So my colleague at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, another historian called William Crawley, he points out, and can Mahendra read the quote, what William Crawley says from the double quote?
Want me to read the whole slide or just the red bits? I'll read the whole thing.
Yes.
Historian, William Crawley points out that it was one of a cumulative series of experiences in his work. I got your Prof too. Excuse me. As an administrator and magistrate, that made Woolf uneasy about imperialism. It was not that he believed that the imperial system was in itself unjust. The injustice was that the principles of imperial justice were neither made nor understood by those to whom they were administered. This is the tragedy of the character of the old man in the village in the jungle. And for Woolf, it was the core dilemma and fault line of British imperialism.
Thank you. So Leonard Woolf unusually returned to Sri Lanka in 1960, and he was given a state welcome and toured around the country. And this you see Nisanka Wijeratna, who was the Diyavarna Nilame of the Dalanda Maligawa and later became the ambassador, Sri Lankan ambassador in Russia, and he was in Moscow. And yes, thank you for listening. And I hope that I was able to, you were able to think of your own experiences of reading The Village in the Jungle and the Southern Province. So I'd like to hear what you think, your own experiences.
Thank you, Shihan. If you could stop sharing now. Yeah, so thank you so much for a very comprehensive discussion with the core of it being Leonard Woolf, but around which all the issues that are interesting to all of us. Could I ask people to show their hands and ask the question by unmuting, please? Who's the first person who's going to show a hand? We have one. Roshan, Roshan Pereira, please. Go ahead.
Right. I'd like to know who the woman is in that last photograph you showed.
Virginia Woolf.
Virginia Woolf committed suicide before 1967.
Which photograph do you
The last photograph that you showed in the slides when you came to Sri Lanka. There are two men, and Leonard is in the middle, and there's a woman there. You can look it up in your slides.
Yes, that is, yeah, hold on. In Ceylon,
The very last slide.
yeah, I have it in his autobiography. It doesn't say who it is, but that picture I got from the internet. If you look at his autobiography, 1911 to 1969, there is a picture with Leonard Woolf, Nisanka Vijayaratna, that lady, and two others. I think it's in the internet. If you look at Leonard Woolf, return to Google, there will be the lady's name.
Oh, if it's in his autobiography, I'll look it up because I have that book.
Yes.
My second question was really more a reflection that I think that Leonard Woolf was very lucky in the work that he did, because part of his job was, when he was the assistant government agent in down south, he would go and camp out and he would hear cases as well. That was part of his job. So there were a lot of cases brought to him. And these cases would have lots of stories about humanity, what it really meant for the villager. And also, when he was camping out, he would talk to the villagers. He really enjoyed talking to the villagers. So he had a really good insight into the mind of a villager. And I remember reading Village in the Jungle for the first time and marveling. I must have been about 18 or 19 at that time, marveling how well he got into the Sri Lankan psyche, that psyche of a villager that I couldn't have done really, even though I'm born in Sri Lanka. So I think in that way, he was very lucky in the work he did that enabled him to do that. And it's a shame that he didn't write more books. My second reflection is about that. I think it was in one of his short stories. He wrote a short story about an Englishman coming to Sri Lanka, falling in love with this really beautiful woman, and more or less keeps her as a concubine. But then he finds that she can't talk to him about things really that really interest him, like books and stuff. And he leaves her. And as far I read this book, this story a long time ago, I think she might have committed suicide. The kind of sort of Lavinia kind of sort of story. But a lot of people claim that it was semi-autobiographical, which I find really intriguing to think that it was a semi-autobiographical, because I believe that the marriage with Virginia was a kind of platonic marriage, because Virginia was a lesbian and she had made him know that there wouldn't be any sex involved in that marriage quite early on, really. I think he talks about that in his autobiography. So I just wanted your comments about those.
Yes, I mean, I haven't read the short story, but that's very interesting what you say. But I find the whole Village in the Jungle, I just wonder whether it's autobiographical in itself. Whether Silindu was this confused man, hunter, whether he was Leonard Woolf himself, who finds himself in the end in Sri Lanka, in Hambantota. In his isolation, whether he found who he was. So, it's not been thought of in that way. But Leonard Woolf, there have been various papers written about his schizophrenia, his schizophrenic mind, split mind, and so on. I mean, being Jewish, English but Jewish, in the Bloomsbury set, even he never belongs completely. He's like the insider who is an outsider. And Virginia was, so English, and it was a terse relationship. Although Leonard was looked after her. So fantastically and nurtured her, without which we wouldn't have seen Virginia's work flourishing. So, yes, there's so many interpretations of the book. Although it's classed as a fictitious novel, I just wondered whether it can be even autobiographical. It's classed as a modernist work where writers were exploring various new techniques, modernist writing.
Well, that's
Roshan,
interesting.
you're a psychiatrist. Is it possible for a man to marry a woman for a whole host of other reasons rather than sex and be happy?
Of course.
Yeah.
I have no issue with that. I'm just conflating the two, the short story. I think a Tales by Moonlight or something like that, in his book of short stories that he writes, and his situation with his marriage. So that's what intrigued me. I thought that your insight that it might be autobiographical interesting. I always considered that these are stories that he might have actually come across when he was a justice. He was hearing cases or around the campfire. So that's why I think that he had a whole host of really interesting stuff that he heard from these villagers, and he could have written stories.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He
I
must
think
have had
Carmen.
must have had a very good memory, because he wrote this all after coming back to England, all on reflection after retiring from the civil service.
Yeah. And although he could have gone back, but he refused to go back, didn't he? He declined to go back. He actively declined to go back. Carmen.
I would just want to ask about the film Baddegama and Lester James Pierce's depiction of it, where Arthur C. Clarke took the role of Leonard Woolf in that movie. Do you have any comments to make about the book? What's your attitude of the Lester James Pierce's reflection on that book?
I haven't actually seen the film. I don't think I've seen the film. But I think all film directors dramatize, the films for the audiences to make it popular. So there is kind of distortion in that way. Maybe somebody who saw the film can comment.
I have a copy of the film. I can send it to you.
Okay.
A digital copy, which I got because it was with Arthur C. Clarke as playing the role of Leonard Woolf. So I will get it through to you.
Have you any views on that, Carmen, about Lester James?
No, I am not an expert in the field. I wanted others experts on it. And I also watched it quite some years ago, and I think it will be a nice film. I will try to get the link and post it to the SLLS group, because it's an interesting film to watch, because it is made this movie.
I think we have
Mahendra,
Narada and possibly Lala and Shanta. Narada, you first.
Well, I mean, I think the film is a very, very accurate conveyance of Baddegama, the Sinhala version. I mean, before reading, I read Village on the Jungle long after. I read Baddegama. I mean, Village in the Jungle, I think, was published in 1914, and Baddegama, the Sinhala, they call it Anuwa there, not translation, by A.P. Gunratna, was published in 1931. For me, when I got through the Royal Entrance, it was one of the 5 books that my father gave me, including Pegama and Baddegama. So I read it when I was 11, and I saw the film, of course, which came long later. But the film is certainly not. There is no. There is no distortion. It's a direct reflection of the novel, and I think it's a beautiful film. Actually, I have a VHS video copy with me, but when I check the YouTube, it's available on YouTube. So any of you can watch it on YouTube.
There he said it's on YouTube.
It's available on YouTube, the film.
Lal, you want to say anything?
Yeah.
No, just to say that the film is on YouTube, and the actor is really not Kamini, is Vijay Kumar Dung.
Baboon.
Vijay Kumaratunga and then Joabe Vikrama and Malini Fonseca, they are all in it. I mean, Lester comes, I mean, it's only at the beginning they show Leonard Woolf going back to the area in that scene only, the very briefly, this chap come, who is this?
What? What is it?
Okay.
The English
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke, yeah. Arthur C. Clarke comes only for a he's not in the story of the film. It is only at the introduction.
Ah,
At
right.
the end, as the
But
judge.
as the judge, he's there as the judge in the.
Ah, he's there as a judge later, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's the judge.
And Hiniham is that deer
Yeah.
incident.
Yeah, the Indiana's deer incident is slightly different to what is in the book.
Ah, really? What's the difference?
No, the book describes in great detail
Yeah.
about that thing, but in the film, it's there like another deer that she liked, So
Oh
it's
my
not
God. But the
exactly.
affection between the deer and her was very, very
He
strong
has
in the
killed
book.
the deer's
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
That's why Hiniham.
Celinda killed the deer's mother, and that's how he
Hiniham.
got the calf. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is one of the things that appealed to me about the book, about his sensitivity for animals, saying that they are not just dismissed as animals, but their feelings. They can have love, hatred, genuine desire, and so on. So he narrows the gap of what we think as superior human beings and animals. So I don't know whether you agree with me or not.
Lal, you read the English Village in the Jungle as well as Baddegama.
I read the English one. The Baddegama, yeah, a long time ago. I can't remember.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but recently I read the English version.
I see. Okay.
Well, for anybody who has not read the English version, I strongly advise you to read it because his literary style is absolutely amazing. He describes the jungle, people, feelings with words which are typical of a good author. He paints a picture with words, and you can see that he's a man who understands. So, on that, Shihan, with your permission, I want to ask the audience, because Leonard Woolf, I agree with you that he's a person who didn't like colonialism, and he understood the people, and he was sympathetic to, if you like, destroying colonialism. But others say that no, he was a typical Suddha who came and went. There's nothing special about him. So there's a dichotomy there, but I don't know whether there are people who believe that he was just another colonialist. Anybody?
There are kind of Leonard Woolf, but he was anti-colonial. Yes, some argue that he was colonial. I think at 24 he graduated from Cambridge, and so he comes like he got a second upper, not a first class. So he wasn't in that cream of undergraduates, but still he's coming. Like the world belongs to him. So he starts off in Jaffna, and his experiences in Jaffna were not the same as in Hambantota in the south, when he was left alone. And that is where I think he finds himself in the wilderness. So that is where I think it becomes autobiographical, like Silindu in the jungle, jungle surrounding him. Silindu finds himself. When Silindu goes, when he's imprisoned, when he's sentenced to death, if people have read the last part of the book, I think that's very interesting. He's waiting to die. And Mahendra, do you remember that he was taught the old beggar teaches him this Pali stanza, which he memorizes, and the more he memorizes, keeps repeating and goes into the memory and says nothing else, and he hears nothing else, and he's condemned, and he's waiting to be sentenced to be killed. And then comes a lawyer, well-dressed Sinhalese person, and he says, okay, now you're not going to be sentenced, you're going to have 20 years life imprisonment. And Silindu was so disappointed because he was looking forward to the end. And he finds himself, through the old beggar, the path, what he calls the path on the right, a hunter, somebody who had killed. And he is now imprisoned, sentenced, he is hunted, he becomes hunted, but he finds himself and he wants to be relieved, to be killed. And yet, there's something exciting, I think that part is very interesting there.
Yeah, I agree with you, because he is a man who was told that he's going to be hung to death, and he just got used to the idea, and with the sadhu guru type of man's teaching, he thought, okay, this is not the end. There's something beyond that I can look forward to. And then somebody said, no, you're not going to die. You're going to live for another 20 years. Oh my God. And his reaction was quite interesting. And to me, it sounds realistic, you see. If a person has got really used to the idea, I'm going to die, I'm going to face it, I'm looking forward to it, there's something after death. And then somebody says, no, you're not going to die. You're going to stay for 20 years in a prison. That must have been a horrible shock for him.
Yes,
So,
and
yes,
the court scenes, the English judge judging him by English legal system, and here's Silindu who believes in karma, Buddhistic way that you're going to be punished if you do bad, you're going to be punished in the next birth. That really brings out the absurdity of colonization. Somebody, imposing their legal systems onto other people whose minds have been formed through philosophies. That's the absurdity of British rule. So he brings it out there, his anti-colonial feelings. That's where I say it's the code for decolonization, because in 1911, height of empire, he can't tell the British, to leave. It hasn't even come to 1933, the Donamo, the reforms where the British, and Leonard Woolf was instrumental in Sidney Webb, the person called Sidney Webb, who was instrumental in sending the Donamo Commission to, to look into all the goings on in Ceylon and propose all the reforms in 1933. So all he can do is write a novel like this, showing the British the absurdity of one civilization imposing itself on people who had self-governing systems which worked very well, and going and upsetting them. Upsetting
just
their
to be the
culture.
devil's advocate, Shihan, the conflict of how people should be punished, you're talking of punishment and how it should be done, it'll always remain a problem with the people's belief systems, whether it's religious or otherwise. What is justice is a big question. But I suppose what came through to me was that the British officers had no inkling at all of how the so-called natives or local people thought about it, But if he thought a little deeper, he could have said, look, my belief is not that different as a Christian, maybe, that after life I'll be treated to hell or heaven depending on how I behave. So I don't know. But what struck me about that court scene was how there were translators, but this chap was just dazed. He didn't know what the hell was going on. They tried to explain to him what was said, but it didn't sink on him. So it was like, I don't know, somebody who speaks, you can sympathize with some of the people in the north who face problem when they go to a police station. There's nobody to take their complaint in their language, which is Tamil, and there's nobody speaking who was able to speak that, and they were at a disadvantage. So it is true that cultural differences can matter a lot, and it affects language and culture. So, but what struck me was this chap was there in the court. They were talking about him and sentencing him, giving all kinds of judgment, and he was completely dazed. The translator couldn't really translate properly, and he was just, he didn't understand. He said, look, I have just told you I killed those two people. What's this about? I have confessed, I told you I killed them. I killed them. So for him, it was a bit of a dilemma. So that's the way I saw it. I don't know whether anybody else wants to comment. Narada?
No, I just want to say that if for people who haven't read the Sinhala book, there is a Sinhala audio book of Baddegama in parts which you can listen to.
Yeah.
It's also on YouTube.
Right. Narada, what do you think of him as an author? The style of writing?
Well, Mahendra, first of all, I had to confess that I joined in the talk at the very end only. I completely forgot and then I didn't, so I don't know the content of the main part of the talk. I have a very high regard for him just from this book. The way he has looked at the life of the villager then, I think in a sympathetic way. Other than that, I don't know much. I don't know about his life story.
Thank you. Any more questions? There's something in chat box. Let me see if there's a question or not. No, that's Padmani thanking Shihan. And Lal saying the film is available on YouTube, so good. We have a question from Raj. Can you unmute yourself, please? Unmute. Can't hear. Unmute.
Hi. I just wanted to add to the conversation this book, which is Woolf in Ceylon by Christopher Ondaatje, which I think is another reflection of Leonard Woolf, which had been published some time back.
Yeah. In fact, for the book, I have with me the Leonard Woolf's book, the introduction written by E.F.C. Ludovic. Yeah. So this is Ondaatje, is it? Right. Okay.
Christopher Ondaatje.
Right. Now, Raj, your question.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I have switched the microphone off.
Okay. Now it's on.
Can
I
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you extremely well.
Good. Nice to see you after a very long time anyway.
I know. Big smile you have.
Well, it's very interesting. I have been listening to all that you said. I have watched the movie. I have read the book. I think the English version of it. I have got the Sinhalese version as well.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting movie. But just to add to that, there's a psychological drama. It's a film titled The Hours. That's the life of Virginia Woolf and her husband. I don't think it's available on YouTube. I have been just checking to see whether it's available. You can get the film, I think, from one of these shops, videos.
What's it called?
The Hours.
Right.
Minutes, hours, The Hours.
Right. Okay.
It portrays the lives of both husband and wife, and up to the point of Virginia Woolf committing suicide. She walks into a stream of water, and quite a rapid stream, and kills herself.
Yeah. It's a sad story. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you very much for all that, which I enjoyed. And I'm a boy from down south, so I enjoyed every bit of it. The film was excellent. It portrays the harsh life down south. It was a black and white movie, if I remember right. I watched it maybe as when it was released way back in the 1960s. Yeah.
Before we finish, I want to share something here. I want to show some references. This is the Global Portuguese book that Shihan was referring to. That's the latest book. Then she has a website which is still under construction, but is nearly done. But it has all the books that she has written and also where to get them, like Legacies, Sustaining African Identity. All the books are there, and also where to get them from. I think I owe it to Shihan just to give a little bit of a plug and say, look, these are worth reading. Here's where to get them. So, I mean, she's a prolific author and prolific researcher. She had done so much, and I'm very glad to be associated with her and call her my friend. I hope she'll accept that I'm a friend. So there you are, the books that she has written. That's the first lot, and that's the second lot. It's not comprehensive on these. If anybody's interested, just let me know, and I can send the references to. If you want, I can put some of them now in the chat box. Any other questions, comments?
Well,
Gonçalo.
the book I have has a different cover photo. It says The Snake Charmer, but the book is Village in the Jungle.
Yeah. There were many. Now look at the book I have. Like that, there are several.
Even Christopher Ondaatje's book I have, it's a different cover.
Yeah. But I think the cover may be different, but the English book is the same. Whoever published it has been changed, But the publication looks different. This book I got in 1999.
I wonder
from
why
a
it's a
British
snake
friend of
charmer.
mine who came to see me in Sri Lanka. And while we were in New Australia, she brought this book and gave it as a present.
Why is it a snake charmer? Lal thinks it's a hunter.
Yeah.
Silindu.
Yeah. Silindu. Roshan, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, actually, look, I had the same book, and it is a hunter because, or a farmer, because there's an axe over his shoulder, really.
Yeah.
But what I really wanted to reflect on is that there is a metaphor at the end. In fact, there are a couple of metaphors at the end.
Yeah.
And the more easy one is where the jungle is sort of enclosing this village, and it gets covered over really and forgotten. And it's like a metaphor for colonialism actually overcoming this a different culture, suffocating it, and then that culture is kind of sort of forgotten. But also, I think there is a metaphor that about the fact that his wife is now looking after the headman who wanted to have her as a concubine, as a mistress, and now she is looking after him. I can't really get that particular metaphor, but I'm sure there is something there. There are multi layers to this book, and that was his style as well, as Virginia's as well, about having multiple layers in the book, really. I just wanted to reflect about that.
Yeah, Roshan, I concur with the first one you made. I got the same feeling that the colonialism is encroaching and ultimately destroying the local culture. I also got that. But the other one about the lady, and I didn't quite get that. Maybe I wasn't thinking laterally enough to get that a second metaphor you mentioned.
Oh, I couldn't get the metaphor, but there must be one, because it seems a very strange thing for the author to do that, really. So I'm sure there is a metaphor there he's wanting us to get, but then not all readers get the metaphors that authors put into their books.
And to me, for an Englishman to write a book on Sri Lanka, which reflects the actual culture, the characters, the words, and so on, to me, it's amazing that he was able to do that. I can understand a local author doing it, but an Englishman who lived there for a short time, able to capture it, to me, is just amazing. I actually enjoyed that book again. I mean, I read it days ago after 20 years, but it was really wonderful. Any other comments from anybody? Shanta, you want to say anything more?
No, it's about, I'm still puzzled about this photo. Doesn't say anything. Silindu is not a snake charmer. Why that photo?
No, Silindu was a hunter. Everywhere he calls himself a
I
hunter.
think it's a photo is about a hunter, but I thought it's a snake charmer.
It says, because the description says snake charm, and that thing is a flute.
There are a lot of snakes around, even around its neck.
So I think that's probably correct. Yeah.
Right.
Why that photo? That's what I was thinking.
Well, I think it's time to stop now. So what I would say is that if you are able to put your video on, please put it on, because we like to see your beautiful faces. And then when I give the okay, we must all put our hands together and thank Shihan for a wonderful presentation. Not only the presentation, but behind the lot of work that behind it. I know the amount of work she put onto it with all her busy schedule. So really appreciate Shihan. Thank you very much. Shall we put our hands together now and bang together? Yay! Well done, well done, well done. And we will keep you informed of the next presentation, but we will have something ready in due course. So once again, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. It's beautiful in Manchester. I don't know what is in London and elsewhere. Thank you very much for coming. Shihan, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting now.
Thank you, Shihan. Thank you.